welcome to A Good Walk Spoiled Adventures in Golf with your host, Scott Poniewaz, also known as Pony Golf. A Good Walk Spoiled is part of the Millions.co and Golfer Gang networks. Thank you for tuning in. Let's swing into this week's episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of A Good Walk Spoiled. Today is an exciting guest to have on, a little blast from the past, childhood memories back in Wisconsin. I've got Jay Blasi of Blasi Golf Design here today. For those of you that don't know him, he's a golf course designer and has had a few pretty major courses under his belt now. Chambers Bay to name one, and most recently, or I guess just about to open, is Poppy Ridge out in California. But I'll turn it over to Jay here real quick and just let him give us a quick elevator pitch of his background. Welcome, Jay.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you having me on. No, it's been a fun journey. As you know, I grew up in Middleton, Wisconsin, and all I've ever wanted to do my whole life is to design golf courses. As a 4 or 5-year-old, we'd flip the placemat over at a dinner table and draw golf holes in crayon. And so ever since that time, I've kind of been chasing down this dream and keep pinching myself that I get the opportunity to do that. And golf has allowed me to travel the world and meet a lot of interesting people and live out all my dreams. So it's been a really fun, wild ride. And even when I'm not working or playing, I get the chance to talk about it with folks who are equally passionate. So it's a lot of fun.
No, it's been exciting to watch the journey. You know, obviously you were a couple years older and closer to my brother's age, but it might be some of the few that have had the chance of playing maybe one of your most exclusive courses and designs in the front yard back in Wisconsin.
That was the third iteration of front yard or backyard golf for the Blasis. My dad built a putting green in their first house in Madison on a lot that's about the size of a living room now. And then when we moved out to Middleton into the regular neighborhood, there was a small green with two little bunkers, and then moved out to the country where they had 7 acres, and then there were three greens out there. So golf has always been in the yard for the Blasis.
Well, and remember hearing stories about you drawing golf holes in school and doodling different course ideas. So tell me a little bit. Obviously, it's been in your blood since you were drawing golf holes with crayons. But when did you really decide to pursue it, and what were the steps you took?
Well, it's funny because it's really kind of all I ever did my whole life. Again, if you go back and look at notebooks in middle school or high school, there's a few math equations and a lot of golf holes in there. But for some reason or another, I just assumed when I went off to college that I would get a degree in business and become the CEO of something. And I guess I don't really know why I didn't think about it as a viable career. I mean, it's a tiny industry. There's a couple hundred people around the world who do it. But I credit my parents. They were the ones who really kind of gave me the kick in the butt when it was time to go to college, to say, why would you study business? You found what you love. Why don't you chase what you love? If it doesn't work out, business will always be there. You can do that whenever. So they did give me a little bit of a kick in the butt. And so I went and enrolled in landscape architecture at the University of Wisconsin. And the reality is I knew golf. I'd been playing and studying golf my whole life, but I didn't know the other stuff. I didn't really pay attention. I didn't know the difference between an oak tree or a maple tree. I didn't know drainage or things like that. And so I had found out that most golf architects got a degree in landscape architecture. So that's what I did. That background served me fairly well. Pretty much every lesson we were learning through college, I was trying to directly apply it to golf and whatnot. But the reality is, what you learn in school is, maybe 1% of what actually matters out in the field. And it's probably more important to just get out there and get some real life experience. And so was fortunate enough after graduating to move out to California. And I went to work for Robert Trent Jones II They were based in Palo Alto, and spent 11 years there, and then started my own firm in 2012.
And so what got you in with Robert Trent Jones, and like how did that come about? Because I have to imagine that's a pretty competitive opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. I had reached out to almost every golf architect anywhere ever. I got to go down and track them down, but I've got some really nice rejection letters from Pete Dye and other people. And so I think what probably helped was that the RTJ2 group designed University Ridge Golf Course in just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. And so I worked there in high school. I competed in the state championships there. While I was in college, I did a project where I designed a second 18-hole course on the property there. So I was intimately familiar with a property that they had done. And so when I reached out to the various firms, at least there was lots of stuff to talk about and similarities. The head of the firm at the time, or the lead designer at the firm, was the guy who kind of was the primary guy behind University Ridge. He grew up in Iowa, so he had a Midwestern background. It was kind of a funny story. I was trying to get an internship while I was in college, and I called, and I got a hold and had this great talk and thought for sure I was getting this internship. And then I called to follow up. There was no reply for months and months and months. And it turns out that at that time, like, the company had like kind of split up and all the designers left, and there was this big kind of turmoil. There was no company basically for a 6 or 12 month period or something like that. And so I never got the internship, but then when things kind of stabilized, then they called. And to your point, it's very rare. They said, we're going to hire somebody for the first time in 5 or 7 years or something like that. And then I flew out for my interview and nobody was there. They all had left to go on, last minute site visits or something like that. So I was in the office basically by myself. And Bobby, Robert Trent Jones Jr., happened to walk in that day. And, he's in the office maybe, 30 to 50 days a year total or something like that. And so we struck up a conversation and kind of hit it off. So it was a lot of dumb luck. The guys in the office later on told me that they thought I got hired because I was short. The last couple guys that were there were real tall, and Bob was sick of tall guys or something. So I don't know. We'll see. Who knows?
And so, while you were there, you got pretty big break to work on Chambers Bay and take the lead on that. How did that come about?
Yeah, so Chambers Bay was a really big project. The golf course is owned by Pierce County, Washington, so it's truly a municipal project. And they put out a big RFQ and RFP. So I think there were 56 formal proposals. So, pretty much everybody was trying to get this job, and then they narrowed it down to 5. And when something like that comes along, there's a lot of work that goes into it in terms of preparing all the company background, and then you have to prepare the actual pitch that you're trying to make and all that kind of stuff. And so for me, I got a glimpse of what the site was and everything, and I just, kind of latched on. And so through the whole process, I was kind of putting the pitch together and ended up making like an 83-page book with a full design of what the course could be and all that kind of stuff. So through the whole interview process, I was kind of involved in getting us trying to win the job. And then once our team won the job, Pierce County basically had everything mapped out. This was early 2004, and they pretty much knew that opening day was going to be middle of June 2007 and what was going to unfold over those 3 years. And they wanted somebody basically devoted full time to them. They didn't want to have to wait to have their phone calls answered or whatever. And the other guys in the office who'd been around for a long time were managing 6 to 8 projects, and some of those were in Europe and some of those were in Asia or whatever. And I was ready to volunteer to be full-time on this project. This was the dream come true for me. So luckily enough, it worked out that what Pierce County needed and wanted, I was able to fill that role on the RTJ side. And, it's all golf projects are a huge team effort. There's over 100 people that work on it in some way, shape, or form, and everybody contributes. But yeah, it was perfect opportunity for me. It was really my first ever kind of go at it. And, I never in a million years would have gotten the job by myself, right? We got the job because of the history of RTJ2 or whatever, but to be able to go out there and play in the world's biggest sandbox was a lot of fun, that's for sure.
No, and it's an incredible course. I think you know Jody and Matt Minder over at Amateur Players Tour. So I actually played in their major out there a couple of years ago, and I guess the only time I'll ever share the stage with Jordan Spieth, I ended up winning the tournament at Chambers Bay. So, yeah, the Wisconsin connection.
Chambers Bay is known for great champions.
But no, it's just an incredible place. And we were lucky that we had good weather, too, for all the days.
Yeah, no better weather in America between 4th of July and September 15th.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, the cool thing about that is, and then I think also this new project with Poppy Ridge, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, but I've noticed throughout your career you've done quite a bit with public courses. Is there a specific direction or something that's pulled you towards some of these more public projects versus private? Because there's like the Glen in Wisconsin and Golden Gate as well, which was recently completed, and obviously Poppy Ridge now. Do you intentionally go after some of these more public projects, or does it just happen?
I grew up playing public golf, right? So my first real golf was at our little Vitens there in Madison, which is a little 9-hole par 3 where you play off of mats and whatnot. And then I graduated up to what was Glenway, is now known as the Glen, which is a little executive course, and then up to Odana and playing 9 holes and then eventually 18. So public golf's always been in my blood. I firmly believe in public golf and municipal golf for that matter. And I would love to see golf as a whole do a better job of supporting municipal or public golf. I've been helping the folks at Sharp Park, which is a municipal golf course in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's on the Pacific Ocean. It's an Alistair Mackenzie course that opened in 1932. And it was involved in a big lawsuit, and there was a really good chance it was going to go away 10 or 12 years ago, and so we fought to save the golf course, and ultimately we want to restore the golf course. But the leader of the organization that's helped save the golf course, the San Francisco Public Golf Alliance, a guy named Bo Links, he explained to me, and it made perfect sense, was that we ought to think about municipal golf the same way we think about universities. Universities don't exist based on the kids paying tuition. They exist based on the alumni giving back. And so I would love to see the municipal golf alumni of the world kind of step up and give back and make sure that all of these facilities stay strong for a long time. There's inherent challenges, at Golden Gate Park. There it's operated by the First Tee of San Francisco, and they privately fundraised the money to be able to redo the golf course. It was a great kind of public-private partnership. And so I think there's opportunities to raise that money to really support municipal and public golf, but nobody's going to write a big check to support municipal golf if it's not going to be maintained properly after they support it on the front end. And so I would love to see some kind of big picture collaboration, whether it's the USGA or the PGA or all these different organizations, even the golf ball companies, the golf club companies. How great would it be if you showed up at a municipal golf course and if you were under 15 years old, there were clubs and balls for you to use, right? I mean, we have so many barriers to entry to the game. Those would be the types of things that would be really important to me. So things that I won't be able to solve, but hopefully I can try to be a steward and maybe part of the solution. So long-winded answer, but yes, public golf, municipal golf is really important to me. When those opportunities come around, I jump at them and want to take advantage of them. To be brutally honest, it's really hard. I wish I could do more of it, but oftentimes the process to earn a job like that is mind-numbing and it's way too much work, and it's kind of skewed towards others, and so it's not really worth your time or energy. I wish that more places maybe had a little bit better process to allow for better solutions.
Yeah, well, and I think that's one of the challenges. I mean, living out in New York on the East Coast for a while, there are so many great courses and so many great architects that built, the Rayners, the Tillinghasts, like all these great courses, but you can't get on them. And so I think it's also sort of sad that, people can't even play some of these masterpieces that have been designed.
Well, that unfortunately boils down to our kind of private club model, which is different than Scotland or Australia or other places. If you go to England or Scotland or Australia, you can get on Royal Melbourne and you can get on Sunningdale, and you can get on, all these famous golf courses, Royal Troon, right? They're far more welcoming to outsiders, and I think U.S. golf would be far better if we adopted more of that model, but they don't put me in charge of private club policies.
Well, and that's one of the cool things about like Pasatiempo, where they at least allocate certain tee times for the public. So, kind of getting back into some design, modern golf is obviously changing, where trees are coming out, more open courses are being designed and things like that. How do you kind of manage that, as you've also worked with some of these older clubs? And I mean, I'm just even thinking, rumor has it you're doing some redesign with Maple Bluff. Is that true?
Yeah, we're in early stages there of just doing planning, and we'll see kind of where that takes us. But yeah, that was kind of an interesting one. My parents joined there when I was in middle school or high school, and so I remember as a middle schooler sitting while Arthur Hill's team gave a presentation about the golf course, and then to think, I don't know, what is it now, 30 years later, something like that, have the opportunity to come back and work there is kind of unique. Yeah, I mean, as you talk about trees and things like that, for me, everything is site specific. So if you look at the work that I've done, I've been fortunate enough to do projects in the upper Midwest, in Texas, California, Washington. And if you look at pictures of one of them, it'll look nothing like pictures of the other. So for me, at least, I try to be really site specific and figure out what's inherently special about that piece of property, what's unique about that club or membership, and try to craft the golf course that best fits that. Specifically as it relates to trees, I mean, basically all the trees that we're taking out are the ones that shouldn't have been planted in the first place, right? So from 1940 to about 1995, pretty much every golf course in America planted trees, whether they should have or not. They usually had a line item in the budget for tree planting, so they'd go to the local nursery and get whatever was on sale or cheapest and just throw it out in any open area. And those trees got bigger and bigger and bigger and wider and taller, and what you see above ground is mirrored below ground. And so from 1995 till about today, pretty much every golf course in America has been removing trees. But the reality is they're removing the trees that shouldn't have been planted.
And, a lot of these older courses too are smaller properties, and I guess it kind of leads me into the next thing, which is like, opening them up, less trees to sort of stop balls or create more trouble. But how do you kind of balance that with a lot of the modern technology that's, creating, bigger hitters and things like that? I mean, even last week, or what was it, 2 weeks ago, Philly Cricket Club and Rory talking about how the course was too short and, the rollbacks and things like that with the golf balls. Like, how do you kind of balance that in modern golf?
Yeah, it's really tough, because the reality is, the top amateurs and the pros just play a completely different game than the average golfer. So for the average golfer, the technology probably isn't that big of an issue. Most people don't have a swing speed fast enough where it's a major deterrent. But there's no doubt that at the top levels of the game, we are long past point of no return in terms of, where the golf ball goes. And so, the USGA came out with something a couple years ago where they're going to try and rein it in a little bit, but that's obsolete before it's even gone into effect. It was 1/10 of what they needed to do or whatever. In terms of how that applies to golf design, right? And again, everything's site specific. Tree removal can make things safer, or it can make things more dangerous, right? So in a certain instance, removing a tree could make something more dangerous because there's not something blocking an errant shot. But at other points, removing trees or shrubs can actually make things safer, in that now there's a lot better line of sight. So you can see if there's somebody on an adjacent hole, and if a ball is coming at you, or if you hit one offline that's headed towards somebody else, you have the ability to yell "for" where you didn't. So I don't know that there's any one-size-fits-all answer or solution to that, but you just try to use common sense and do what's best for each specific property and each specific location.
Totally makes sense. And so now, a lot more people since COVID, I feel like, have been paying attention to architecture, the designs. They're learning more and more. Fried Egg and all these different content companies have popped up, and Do you feel like that's creating more project opportunities for you? And is the design business sort of hitting a resurgence right now?
Well, it's definitely a boom time, that's for sure. I don't know if it's directly attributable to, content and golf architecture awareness. I would contend that odds are it's really a byproduct of COVID itself. That COVID seems to be the best thing that's ever happened to golf, even better than Tiger Woods. Everybody got out. Basically what we've found is through COVID, every private club is full with a waiting list, increased initiation fees and dues. And so therefore all the clubs are flush with cash, and many of them had infrastructure needs. Their irrigation system might be due for investment or different things. And so because of that, they're reinvesting in their golf course. So that means a lot of work for people. There's also now a resurgence in some new builds, not what it was in the 80s or 90s, early 2000s, but there's a lot more than there was 7 years ago. And most of those are at the very high end, lots of times destination resorts out in the middle of nowhere, private clubs, things like that. So definitely a boom time. And the fact that more people are interested in architecture and more people are following along, there's greater awareness. I think those things are all positives for the game. Hopefully there's opportunities for everybody as we move forward to see some different things and see what's best moving forward.
Well, and kind of continuing on that topic, who are some of the architects or designers that you feel have really impacted your career?
Well, obviously, spending 11 years working at the RTJ2 organization, I learned a lot in terms of the business side of things and what goes into building client relationships and putting together plans that are viable for bidding and specifications for building golf courses. Getting all of that experience and opportunity was invaluable. As it relates to my own personal preferences in terms of design and architecture, how I actually go about building golf courses, I would say that I probably am closer affiliated to other architects in terms of kind of the process and maybe the principles that I hold dear. Names that I'm sure everybody regurgitates all the time, like Core Crenshaw and Tom Doak and those guys. So, but the neat thing now is that I feel like there's a lot of different people doing good work, and the key is opportunities, right? And so that's the key is finding owners and developers and clubs who are willing to give you a chance and let you show what you can do, type of thing. So, but it really is a good time for golf.
Well, and we kind of touched on it earlier about how competitive it is to get into the design business. If you were somebody sort of starting out your career or trying to break into career nowadays, what kind of advice would you give somebody?
For sure. So, I did the school route. I got a degree in landscape architecture and then went and worked for somebody in an office. And that sounds good. And, I hear from dozens of people a year asking about that and kind of wanting to go down that road. The reality is nowadays, I would say while you're in high school, go try to work on a maintenance crew or a construction crew. While you're in college, if you choose to go to college, go work on a maintenance crew or a construction crew. The reality is you maybe don't need to go to college. Just go get on a construction crew and let everybody know that you're interested in architecture. And when the architect comes to town, more often than not, if they're nice, they'll spend time and kind of show you what they're doing and whatnot. The key is just to try to get your foot in the door somehow, some way. The other thing I would tell people, this is something that I've kind of learned over time, is figure out what really makes you happy. There's a lot of people that are probably chasing or think what will make them happy is being a famous designer with their picture on the cover of a magazine holding a set of plans or whatever. And the reality is that they're the same person you might see on the cover of a magazine holding a set of plans might not do much golf architecture. They might spend a lot of time in an office. They might spend a lot of time in boardrooms making pitches. They might spend a ton of time on airplanes trying to get jobs. They might spend a lot of time dealing with HR and personnel issues within a company, all that kind of stuff. If what you really love and what really makes you happy is building golf courses, then you might be happier if you were on a team that builds golf courses, whether that's being a shaper who's in a bulldozer or an excavator, whether that's being a project manager, kind of overseeing the construction. There's lots of different ways to contribute to building a golf course. And so I just am a big believer in figuring out what makes you happy and trying to do that, not maybe what you think society deems as successful. So, yeah, I think you're best if you want to get into golf architecture. I tell people all the time, it's a really hard business to get into. If this is not if you don't think about it and dream about it every night, if when you're taking a shower, you're not constantly thinking about it, it's probably not worth pursuing. It needs to be like in your blood. If you couldn't breathe without doing this, if you couldn't imagine any other job, I can't do any other job. I feel like I'm a smart enough guy who's capable of stuff. If you told me I had to go work in an office, I'd just shrivel up and die. So, make sure it's part of your blood. If it is, then all right, go for it and chase it. And probably your best bet is to start on a construction site.
Great advice. And I guess as you're kind of looking forward to this coming year or coming years, what exciting projects are on the books or that you can share at this point?
Sure. Yeah. Well, this is an exciting time right now. We're getting ready to open Poppy Ridge. That'll open for public play on May 31st. So that's been a big one the last year. That was a 27-hole facility. This is in the San Francisco Bay Area, just in the East Bay, kind of wine country. And we took the 27 holes and created an 18-hole championship golf course and blew it up and completely rerouted the golf course. And so it's a new golf course on the site of an old golf course. And I'm really excited about it because it's really a breathtaking property. It's a big landscape, basically heaving, rolling land with golden grasses and dotted with oak trees, and then views to the golden hillsides in the distance. So it's a really beautiful piece of property. The golf course that was there before was not walkable. And so by rerouting and coming up with a new plan for the golf course, we were able to make it walkable. So I'm very excited about that. The golf course is owned and operated by the NCGA, the Northern California Golf Association. And so they host a number of championships. And so that walkability will allow them to host championships out there. So really, really eager and excited for everybody to get out and experience that. And that's, again, truly public and really, really affordable, especially if you're an NCGA member. I think it's $70 during the week and $100 on the weekend or something like that. So pretty crazy value. I'll be spending most of my time this year in Minnesota, working at a club called Burl Oaks on the west side of the Twin Cities. And that'll be a 2-year project. And that's a private club where we will basically blow up the golf course and build a new one there. The reverse of Poppy Ridge, we're going to go from 18 holes to 27 holes. We're going to add a little 9-hole short course. So I'm really excited about that little 9-hole short course as well. And then I've got projects in Wisconsin and Texas and California and Washington State that are on the books. And then there's 2 projects that I'm chasing that I would be very, very excited about. Those would be the ones that would really get me going. So
we'll stay tuned for those. Very cool. And I guess, do you have any secret little thumbprint or anything that you tend to put on all of your designs that goes course to course? That maybe it's a secret. I don't know.
No, there's no hidden little W bunker or anything like that out there. But I would say the one thing that is pretty consistent, I talked earlier about really trying hard to be site-specific, So if you look at a picture of Chambers Bay or Lakeside Country Club in Houston or Century World in Wisconsin, they're going to look just drastically different. But my hope would be, I'm a really, really big believer in what happens to the golf ball after it hits the ground. So I love interesting contours in and around greens. And so I think if there was one kind of unifying elements to the golf courses that I've worked on, is that if you were to look at the green complexes, you would probably find a lot of different slopes and undulations. Many times those slopes can be really helpful, whether that's a backboard or a sideboard or a big kind of feeder kicker slope. So those are things that, regardless of the location, I think you'd probably find some of those elements on all the golf courses that I've worked on.
All right, so 2 sort of quick hit questions right at the end. Dream foursome.
Well, I probably just got to execute my dream foursome. My dad and brother flew out from Wisconsin the other day we had a internal NCGA opening at Poppy Ridge, so I got to play with my dad, my brother, and my son Bennett was with us out there hitting some shots too. So that would be the dream foursome for me. But I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of cool people. But at the end of the day, like we talked about, there's nothing more important than family to me. So,
well, and that's a perfect transition to my last question, because your dad and you have a history of hole-in-ones, right? So how many hole-in-ones do you have at this point?
Well, I was late to the game, so I went a long time without a hole-in-one. I had hit the pin, I had lipped out. I think I had 5 or 6 times at University Ridge growing up where I firmly believe I made a hole-in-one. And it never happened. So while we were building Chambers Bay, I convinced myself that, well, the reason it hasn't happened was that it was meant to happen on my own golf course. And so at Chambers Bay, I convinced myself every time I ever stepped up to any par 3, anytime I played Chambers Bay, that it was going in. And I would tell all the playing partners, this has to go in now or whatever. And that never happened. I hit the pin and got close a couple times, but that never happened. So now I'm like completely dumbfounded. And the next golf course after Chambers Bay was a course called the Patriot. If anybody's ever heard of the Folds of Honor Foundation, Lieutenant Colonel Dan Rooney's organization, that's based there. And so we built that, and it opened in 2010. And on opening day, we were playing and played the full round and kept going. I was on a heater. I think I was 6 under for a 6-hole stretch, best 6-hole stretch of my life. And I called my shot and made my first hole-in-one. The first one at the course at the Patriot. So that was really exciting. And then since that time, so that's I guess now that's 15 years ago, but this past fall, I just made my 5th. So it's been a fun run. And the one last fall was actually at Sand Valley at the Mammoth Dunes course at Sand Valley. It was R4. And the people I was playing with, we had a long wait on the tee. And so we played 3 days of golf and never took a video or a picture. But on that hole, for whatever reason, they were taking a video. And so I got the whole thing on video. So that was kind of fun. So I'm up to 5.
That's awesome.
But I'm well short of my dad. I think my dad's at 7 or 8. And my brother is at 0.
I was gonna make sure that we called that out just
He's
for John.
At 0, and we were pulling. So we were pulling really hard for him at Poppy Ridge. We all want him to get it. We want him to get it somewhere fun and special. In fact, I took him out. We played Sequoia, where I'm going to work next year, which is a club in Oakland that I'm really excited about. And then we raced over to play Golden Gate Park at night. And so we're out there, and the sun's going down, and it was pretty magical setting. So we played the 7th hole, which is a neat little hole with a kind of a horseshoe green and some cool slopes. And so I'm telling him, okay, hit it left of the green and let the slope take it in. So we hit our tee shots, and I think we each hit a couple of tee shots, and 2 of them went like right past the hole, and we were oohing and eyeing. And then I took him up about 10 or 15 yards further and off to the side, and I said, now I always bring people over here, and I tell them you have to use your lowest lofted club in your bag, and the ball can't land on the green. It's got to land left of the green or whatever, and try from here. And my brother got up and he hit it, and it went left, and it went in the hole. So he's trying to count that as an ace, but I don't think it's there. So it's close. It's close, but not there yet.
Awesome. Well, I guess before we kind of wrap up, thanks so much for joining, and some great stories here, so thanks for sharing. And anything else that we haven't had a chance to touch on that you want to plug or pitch? Or
No, it's been great. It's good to catch up and reminisce the good old Wisconsin days. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk golf. And hopefully people can follow along at I'm trying to think, Blasi Golf on Instagram and Jay Blasi on Twitter and blasigolf.com. There you go.
Perfect. I'll drop those in the description as well, so people have them. And thanks so much, and hopefully we'll catch up at Nakoma or something one of these days, or
come play golf in California.
Well, that's true.
Weather's always perfect
closer.
here.
It's closer. So, awesome. Thanks so much, Jay.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
That concludes today's episode of A Good Walk Spoiled. Adventures in Golf, hosted by Scott Poniewaz. That's myself. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, rate it high, and follow us on Instagram at pony_golf to stay in the loop. We'll catch you next time.